Welcome to Swords and Hammers. Truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind alone forgets. The world is loud, but for the next few minutes, it can wait. Take a moment, settle yourself, listen well. Come, let us begin. The House of Beautiful Lies. Part 1. The Invitation. There exists, in that twilight realm between sleeping and waking, a house that every soul must enter. Some find it in their youth, when the world first whispers its contradictions. Others stumble upon its threshold in the midnight of despair. But all who seek truth must eventually stand before its door. The house appeared to me on an ordinary evening, though I now understand that no evening is ordinary, when eternity presses against time's thin membrane. I had been walking through the marketplace of ideas, that ancient bazaar where merchants hawk their philosophies like spices and silks. Every voice promised enlightenment, every path claimed to lead homeward. The cacophony was maddening, 1,000 truths cancelling each other out, until nothing remained but noise. Then I saw it, a mansion of impossible architecture, its windows glowing with different-coloured lights. Above the door, carved in stone that seemed to shift and breathe, were the words, "Enter all who seek the truth." The doorkeeper was beautiful beyond description, with eyes that held the depth of stars. "Welcome, seeker," he said, his voice like honey poured over silver. "Within these walls dwell all the spirits that have ever claimed to know the way. Test them if you dare. But beware, many who enter never leave, for they fall in love with beautiful lies." Part 2. The Gallery of Spirits. The first room blazed with golden light. Here stood a spirit clothed in the robes of wisdom, surrounded by admiring crowds. "I will tell you the secret," it proclaimed. "You are divine. The spark of godhood burns within you. You need no savior, for you are your own salvation. Ascend through knowledge, transcend through understanding." How my heart leapt at these words. To be told that I was not fallen but merely forgetful, not sinful but simply unenlightened. What wounded soul would not drink deeply from such a cup? The Spirit's followers glowed with self-satisfaction, their faces radiant with the beauty of their perceived divinity. But as I watched longer, I noticed something terrible. Their eyes were empty. Behind the confident smiles lurked a gnawing hunger that no amount of self-affirmation could satisfy. They were starving at a banquet of mirrors, eating their own reflections and calling it bread. The second room pulsed with purple shadows. Here, a more subtle spirit whispered of the Christ, but what a Christ! He was the greatest teacher, it crooned, a master of wisdom, an enlightened soul. Follow his example, embrace his philosophy, but do not be so primitive as to think him God. Such crude anthropomorphism belongs to darker ages. This spirit's followers were learned, sophisticated. They quoted ancient texts and spoke in measured tones. Yet when I mentioned blood and crosses, when I spoke of substitutionary death, they recoiled as if I had uttered obscenities. Their Christ was bloodless, ethereal, a phantom who could inspire but never save. Room after room I wandered, each containing its own spirit, its own gospel. One divided the human Jesus from the divine Christ, creating a schizophrenic savior. Another added layers of human mediation, building elaborate staircases to heaven that crumbled under the weight of a single sin. Still another redesigned the Christ entirely, fashioning a tame deity who blessed every impulse and challenged no rebellion. Part 3. The Mirror Maze. Deeper into the house I ventured, until I reached a hall of mirrors. Here was the most cunning deception of all. Each mirror showed me myself, but transformed. In one I appeared noble and good, needing only encouragement to reach my potential. In another, I seemed wise and knowing, capable of discerning truth through reason alone. Every reflection flattered, every image exalted the viewer. "This is the final test," whispered a voice like autumn wind through empty trees. "Choose the mirror that shows your true self, and you will find the door to freedom." I stood paralyzed. Each reflection seemed more beautiful than the last. Each one called to some deep desire within me, to be special, to be powerful, to be independent, to be divine. The mirrors began to spin, faster and faster, until I was surrounded by a kaleidoscope of false selves, each one demanding recognition, each one claiming to be the truth of my nature. Then I remembered, or rather, something beyond memory stirred within me. An ancient word, written not in any book but upon the fabric of reality itself. Test the spirits. "Show me," I cried out to the spinning mirrors, "show me Jesus Christ." The effect was instantaneous and terrible. Most of the mirrors cracked, their surfaces unable to bear the weight of that name. Others showed shadowy forms, half-entities that dissolved when examined. But one mirror, just one, began to glow with a different light entirely. Part 4. The Scandal of Flesh. In that single mirror, I saw something that should have been impossible. The eternal Word, through whom galaxies were spoken into being, was crowning in a virgin's womb. Infinity was measuring itself in inches. The Ancient of Days was learning to walk on legs that wobbled like a newborn colt's. This was no philosophical abstraction, no spiritual metaphor. This was flesh, real, vulnerable, bleeding flesh. I saw hands that had shaped mountains, now learning to shape wood in a carpenter's shop. I saw feet that had walked on stars, now stumbling on Palestinian stones. The Creator had entered his creation not as a tourist, but as a citizen, not as a phantom, but as a fellow sufferer. The other spirits in the house began to shriek. "Impossible!" they cried. "Degrading! Primitive! How can the infinite be contained in the finite? How can the eternal die?" But that was precisely the point, the beautiful, terrible, glorious point. Every other spirit offered a ladder for humanity to climb to heaven. Only this one showed heaven descending to earth, God becoming what we are, so that we might become what he is. Part 5. The Door of Blood. The mirror that showed the incarnate Christ began to change. The glass became liquid, then turned the color of wine, then deepened to the crimson of blood. Through it I could see a door, the only real door in this entire house of illusions. But to reach it, I had to pass through the blood. Every instinct recoiled. Surely there must be a cleaner way, a more dignified path. The other spirits pressed close, offering alternatives. "Go around," they whispered. "Find another route. This is unnecessarily crude, grotesquely primitive. Modern souls need not wade through blood." Yet, as I stood hesitating, I noticed something. The beautiful doorkeeper, who had welcomed me, his face was changing. The masks were falling away, and beneath the beauty was a terrible emptiness, a howling void that had never known love, only hunger. This was the spirit of Antichrist, and it could offer nothing but dissolution. I plunged through the blood mirror. The sensation was not what I expected. Instead of horror, there was cleansing. Instead of degradation, there was dignity. The blood did not stain. It washed. It did not diminish. It enlarged. For this was not merely blood, it was life, divine life, poured out and offered freely. Part 6. The world made solid. On the other side of the door, I found myself in a garden. But this was no ordinary garden. Everything here had weight, substance, reality. After the ethereal illusions of the house, the sheer solidity of this place was overwhelming. The grass was magnificently grass. The trees were triumphantly trees. Everything was more itself than seemed possible. And there, in the center of the garden, stood a figure. Not a spirit, not a phantom, not an idea, but a person. He bore the marks of nails in hands that were unmistakably human, yet somehow more than human. His eyes held both the sorrow of every grief and the joy of every triumph. This was the Christ who had come in the flesh, and in his presence, every false spirit seemed like a bad dream from which I had finally awakened. "You have passed the test," he said, and his voice was like thunder and like music and like the first word ever spoken. "You have confessed that I have come in the flesh. Now understand what this means." Epilogue. The Fourfold Victory. He showed me then what his incarnation had accomplished. Because he had taken flesh, he could be my Savior, bearing in that flesh the weight of judgment I could never bear. Because he had inhabited a body, he could sanctify my body, making it a temple rather than a tomb. Because he had embraced our frailty, he could heal our sicknesses, understanding suffering from the inside. And because he had risen in that same flesh, glorified but still scarred, he would return as king, not as a disembodied spirit, but as the eternal God-man. I understood then why the test of spirits matters. We live in a world thick with voices, each promising enlightenment, each offering its own path to transcendence. But only one has crossed the infinite gulf between creator and creature. Only one has entered our story, not as a narrator, but as a character, not as a judge, but as a substitute. The house of beautiful lies still stands, and souls still enter it daily. The mirrors still spin their flattering deceptions. The spirits still whisper their alternatives. But for those who dare to test them, who demand to see the Christ, who are willing to pass through blood, to find truth, for them, the single door remains open. And beyond it waits not an idea or a philosophy or a spiritual technique, but a person, the Word made flesh, the scandal that saves, the God who bleeds, the eternal paradox that makes all lesser mysteries fade, that the Creator entered creation, that life tasted death, that the infinite became an infant. This is the confession that separates truth from every beautiful lie. Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. Test every spirit against this reality. Accept no substitute, for in a world of phantoms, only the incarnate one is solid ground. Selah.